and welcome to Fiction Forge Studio. I'm Clover. Thanks for tuning in. And this episode, we are going to get started with Sudowrite and writing a short story with Sudowrite. Pretty much from start to finish, if we can manage that. And seeing how some of the story engine features work in Sudowrite for this type of thing. So Fiction Forge is really a place where we're going to experiment with various AI technology and using it to write short fiction, short stories, fan fiction, serials, things like that. This is what I write, so this is what we are going to be playing around with on this channel. And today, because it is October and we're all in that spooky season mood, we are going to start off with a steampunk horror short story. I started brainstorming some ideas, and it was really a genre that kept sort of popping up, and it seemed like it would be a lot of fun. So we are going to get started. This is pretty much a fresh a fresh project here, and we are going to jump right into the story engine with a few ideas. Now, there is a really cool feature right here on the front page called Twist, and if you have very, very little ideas, this is definitely a good place to start brainstorming. The Sudowrite canvas is another one that's sort of like that. But right now, I do want to show you guys the twist feature because it's really, really cool. And it can automatically give you a lot of really neat ideas to go off of. It gives you a couple of genre options. It's not a lot and probably isn't really going to affect it too much, but depending on what you're going for. Since we're leaning more into the horror than the steampunk, I'm going to stick with fantasy. I really, it could probably go either way in this particular case. But we're going to stick with fantasy, and I'm going to show you what happens when you put a basic story idea into this twist. And I kind of came up with three kind of stories to brainstorm here. And we're just going to start with the first one, the haunted airship. Come on, who doesn't love an airship? So let's see what happens when you put this in here and hit submit. And this is probably one of the coolest brainstorming tools that I've seen in a lot of these programs. So you could tell already it kind of just spits out a bunch of random ideas. And these ideas expand on the original premise, right? So the original premise was pretty basic. A haunted airship believed to be lost for decades mysteriously reappears on a foggy night. A team of ghost hunters boards the ship to investigate, but they quickly discover that the spirits on board are not the only malevolent force at play. So as you could tell, it's sort of a vague idea of who the main characters are and what the plot is, but not a lot of specifics. So it's really kind of cool that if you wanted to really get a handle on the specifics of the story early on, this is a great way that you can brainstorm it. And a lot of these are actually kind of cool looking. I mean, a man who speaks with the voice of the dead contacted the ship's crew before it set out on its voyage, then continued to observe and influence the ship's crew until its eventual discovery. He reveals himself to be the last surviving crewman and invites the ghost hunters to the ship's holds, where they discover that the ship is not a vessel of death and destruction, as their station had led them to believe. Instead, it's a long-lost floating library with the ghost of the man who built and crewed the ship still attached to the wreckage. I mean, sure, you could go that way. Maybe not exactly horror scary, but you can see how it gives you Some really cool ideas. Actually, the first one's kind of neat too. The ship is revealed to be the only Storm, the flagship of the legendary pirate King Blackheart. The ghosts are the ghosts of the crew who succumbed to Blackheart's curse and became his walking dead. The ghost hunters come into the possession of the key to his vault, a weapon strong enough to destroy the ship for good, but powerful enough to destroy them all. You know, the ideas, of course, here that pop up, or what happens to this ship at the end. Maybe they do destroy it. It probably makes sense if it's haunted. And the idea that these ghost hunters are probably going to go on this ship looking for something in particular. So anyway, it gives you a lot of really cool ideas. It's a great brainstorming tool. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff with it. So and then when you go back to your main page, that twist info is just right here over on the right side. And that is where a lot of information in this part of Sudowrite tends to show up. So that information is still available to you. You could just click right on it and it'll pop down. And this kind of has the way that a lot of times it showed. And then any of these that you wanted to keep and use, uh, exploratory vessel, old ship destroyed by a steampunk madman in a in a steampunk madman attack. Yeah. So some of these are a little out there, honestly. And look, here's really specific. The airship was built by Nolan, man capable of creating incredibly realistic projections. Um, Nolan's wife's real name is Wayne. Yeah, it gets into some crazy stuff sometimes. It can be really creative, and in that sense, it can be a little strange. But again, it's a great brainstorming practice. And then if there were any of these that you wanted to keep, like if you wanted to keep this ending here, revenge for a crime his brother perpetrated, and the crew is blamed, you thought that was cool, then you can just hit insert and it'll pop it right over here into one of these um, tabs, a page where it'll just hold on to that, and you can incorporate it at some point, hold on to it. As I might rename something like this, notes to look back on, so that I kind of, be like, these are some ideas to go back to. Okay, so let's pop into the story engine, and we will use the same prompt and see how it see how it does as the inspiration for the story. Now, again, keep in mind, Sudowrite doesn't really have a concept of how long or short a piece that you're going for, and this is something that I tend to include in prompts later on, or more specifically when we get to the size of the outline and things like that. But hopefully this will generate a few ideas for us. It depends. Sometimes it can be a little more vague than others. We're going to come over here into the genre, and I generally keep this pretty simple. I have noticed that some folks go all out and try to maximize the 40 words here. And you probably could do that. You could add other words that would be included in the category fantasy, paranormal, maybe even specific tropes that you are using. But I don't really think that's exactly necessary. A lot of the more pertinent information when it comes to the prose that we'll generate later comes along with the style, and we'll get to that a little bit later, because this part of the process we're still just kind of figuring out what the story is all about. So we have our brain dump here. It's still that very vague idea. And let's see what happens when we just generate a synopsis of based on this shorter idea. Okay, so yeah, it wrote about 383 word synopsis. It's really not bad. And it even has details about dark and foggy nights, Very ominous. The main character is a seasoned paranormal investigator named Sarah, leads the team to explore the ship. They discover the ship, the spirits are not the only malevolent force. Strange occurrences begin to happen, and it becomes clear something sinister is lurking in the ship's walls. All right, so decades earlier, a group of scientists have been conducting experiments on board trying to harness the power of the supernatural, but their experiments had gone horribly wrong, and the ship disappeared without a trace. They are trapped in a race against time to uncover the truth. All right. And it looks like are they going to give an idea of what the actual malevolent force is? Okay. So not as such, but for if you're looking for a short story that's going to be, between 3 to 5,000 words, or even maybe more like 5 to 10,000 words, you've still got something to go on here. And um, before I even, at this point, you definitely would start looking at expanding the synopsis. But before I do that, I'm actually probably going to go straight to generating the characters, because that will give us a little inspiration as well, not just about, of course, our main character, Sarah, but she's going to have other crew members. And then we'll sort of have some extra inspiration. And sometimes the AI will even jump in with the antagonist and other details here that they might not have expanded on as much in the synopsis. So it's always interesting to see. So we've got Sarah, the lead investigator, Sarah's right hand, Charlie, another ghost hunter, Grace. And some really great personality traits on some of these too. Again, nothing incredibly detailed, but you've got uh, he's got messy hair, and he is absorbed in his research. I like this one. Grace is eager to dive headfirst into danger. And then you've got another ghost hunter. This is the guy with all the experience. Oh, and then this is one of the scientists from the ship. I guess a survivor. Oh, and here we go, the antagonist. So the malevolent force, this entity is the embodiment of dark energy taken hold of the ship. It's cunning and ruthless, always one step ahead of the investigators. Its ultimate goal is shrouded in mystery, but clear that it will stop at nothing to achieve its sinister aims. All right, then. So, yeah, at this point, we've got a lot of great information to go on. And this is when you probably want to really take a break and start looking over these details and start thinking about how each of these characters are they going to fit in. Do we need there's 4 ghost hunters here? Do we need all of those ghost hunters? I would even be tempted to say a 3-person team might make the most sense, rather than trying to have more than up to 4 or 5 when it's a short story. Keep it simple. So at this point, what I would probably do is grab my little, okay, so we've gotten to the outline portion, and we definitely need to tweak a few things before we keep going. But I do want to show you the brief. This is just a 5-chapter, and you can see the format that they're asking for the outline. And you would have, if it was a longer novel you're working on, you would definitely likely have several acts, many chapters. But since we're focusing on a short story, we are just gonna, stick with maybe, and I'm just gonna separate these because it makes it a little easier for me to kind of keep track when I'm going through everything that's going to happen. So you're going to be looking at this, depending on how long each of these sections are. I don't necessarily consider them chapters. Again, we're just calling them that because this is the format that the outline wants. If you ever need a refresher, if you forget and you've already deleted, you can just pop on over to this little question mark here, and it gives you the information on the format and what you need. Um, but if this were a short story, then the first chapter would be, sort of the everyday situation, a glance at what's going on, and this would probably be around 250 to 500 words, maybe. Then the next section, after you've sort of just introduced the setup of the characters, what they're doing there every day, then the next thing would be the inciting incident. Oops. And that would probably also be in the 250 to 500 word category. Again, depending on how long you're shooting for. And then this third area would definitely be the build. I guess I would call it the build up. The rising tension to what is coming. In this particular story, this is going to be when they're exploring the ship. Right? They're looking. They board the inciting incidents probably when they board the ship. They already know it's haunted, presumably. So the chapter one would be on the ship, going to the destination, making the plan. Chapter two might be boarding the ship, and the first encounter with the spirits or the malevolent entity in the ship. The buildup in the next section, which I would say is probably going to be more like 1,000 to 2,000 words. So again, you can see with the difference in the number of words, these are not, each section here is not presumed to be the same length. Whereas if you were doing chapters in a novel, they would probably be a little bit closer in range to the same word count. Most of your chapters are probably going to be 2,000 to 5,000 words, depending on the genre that you write in, if you were writing a full-length novel. But this is just sort of an outline of, again, a short story, and the different parts of a short story just are drastically different as far as so you can look at it more as comparing an act one to an act two, right? So act one is generally considered much smaller in a novel than act two, which is usually the bulk of what happens in the novel. And then act three would be the conclusion, which would also be much shorter. So these are just the parts of the short story as I usually look at it and structure it. So then the buildup, as I said, they're running around the ship. They're trying to figure out what's going on, what they're up against, and then this chapter 4 is probably where you're going to be looking at some climactic scene, and again, this could be anywhere from it may depending, but yeah, probably more like 2,000 words, maybe more, um, depending on, again, what you have going on. So this is where they would, finally confront the entity, discover its weakness, and ultimately defeat it, destroy the ship, whatever they decide to do. And then you've got your final conclusion, which is going to just be sort of the aftermath. So I hope that makes sense as far as what I'm thinking of, and the conclusion, again, anywhere around 500 words probably. So this is what would be, yeah, definitely more like a 5,000 word short story, and you could beef up the number of words in each of these areas if you wanted to flesh it out a little bit more. Or you might even have other in betweens some of these that, maybe you would want more build up, or another something that comes sort of in between the climactic scene. Um, to sort of differentiate a little bit more, and that's fine, because the cool thing is you can make as many of these as you want. Again, as long as you start with this act one and give that some kind of name, and then go chapter by chapter after that in the same format, you can pretty much add as many chapters or sections as you want. So that is the easiest, clearest, I think, structure for a short story, and it works for almost every genre. I tried it at least with several, um, and it seems to work just fine. And you see already here where the chapter one is the only given chapter that the Sudowrite just already has. They assume you're at least going to have one chapter, and see how the everyday, that what I wrote as the description of that chapter is kind of what shows up here. And if you had a lengthy description that you wanted to put in there, it would pop up all of it. You wouldn't be able to see all of it. I'm pretty sure the longer it is, it sort of hides a lot of that. But you don't necessarily need to have that in the chapter unless you're actually using that description to generate your beats. And you can definitely do that. So the next step is going to be to really flesh out what exactly is happening in each of these sections. Okay, so here's what we're going to do next. We are going to take that little outline we have going on. I'm going to separate it so you guys can see it a little bit better here. As you can tell, I've just gone with 5 chapters, and I kept the word count number on here so that I can reference that when I need to. Okay, so you got all 5 chapters, and obviously you can see these are very different lengths depending on how long we need these to be. And let me show you how exactly I came up with the information that is now in here. So we're going to back up a little bit to the previous boxes that we've done. So as you can see in the characters, I streamlined this a little bit, right? It gave us extra characters to start with when we were generating the information on our own. I just came in and made a few little tweaks. I changed Sarah to Sadie because there was a little too much similarity with 2 names ending with the AH. I know it's probably just me, but those are the kinds of things I change. It bothers me, so I'm going to change that a little bit. I sort of made them into more treasure hunters rather than just ghost hunters, because I felt like that was a better sort of psychological twist on the whole thing. If their job is already to hunt ghosts and that's what they're there for, it doesn't up the stakes as much as if they are there hunting treasure. And I did also add a little extra clockwork element to our extra guy here, and he is now a clockwork cyborg member of their team. So really, again, it was more sort of condensing because it's a short story and we don't really need a lot of characters. So we're down to 3 characters. So the main information that we're going to use are these characters, and then going back to our original idea here, right? Just the haunted airship. And then the other bit of information I'm going to use is one of the twists that we had on our list of twists. If you remember that we came up with, one of the very first ones that popped up here was the one about King Blackheart and the Only Storm ghost ship. So I just kind of thought that was really cool, and it spoke to me, and so that is the twist that I ended up using. All right, so in order to, let's go back to Story Engine. So in order to get this completed outline of only 5 chapters, you can just of course, you can just write them all out if you sort of already have your set idea. But I took these three main elements and I sort of created a prompt. So here we are in my Google Docs, and you'll see the prompt at the top is read the following story information for The Airship of Lost Souls, which is the name that I've given this story, and write a 10 chapter outline for the story. So why 10 chapters? Again, the length that we're going for here is a little bit arbitrary since we're dealing with a short story. But since the AI tends to always have a little more filler than I would like, a little more vagueness, I tend to sort of give it more room. So by giving it 10 chapters to work with, we're hoping for enough information to be able to pick and choose what we want. So that's why the 10 chapters. You could go with less, you could go with more. It really depends. Okay, so the first bit of information we have, remember I've asked it just to read the following information. So we've got our haunted airship prompt, which was one of many prompts that were generated early on for different story ideas. Then we've got our twist that the ship is the only storm, um, by Pirate King Blackheart. And then the other information in the prompt is use the following characters. And here are our three characters, and that's it. And you would just take all of this information and you could slap this into ChatGPT, Google Bard, whatever AI you're using if you wanted a little assistance in putting this together. And what you're going to come up with, what I ended up with, is something that looks like this, right? And so you can see it has a list of these chapters, goes all the way down to chapter 10. And it used all the characters we gave it. Sadie, Grace, and Elijah are here. They have found the only storm and they uncover all of these things with the ship. It included a lot of really great information. The team is witnessing these spectral scenes from the ship's past and unsettling visions. How cool is that? That's a really great idea. They learn about a mutiny that led to Blackheart's curse and demise. And then we get into the characters' personalities affecting the story. Grace's impulsiveness leads to a near disastrous encounter with a vengeful spirit. So you can see it has taken this information that, for the most part, was generated by Sudowrite with just a few little tweaks. And so all of this information I took and condensed into, well, I didn't even really condense it. I just picked the main parts that I wanted in the short story, and I broke it down into that 5 chapter outline that I made in Sudowrite. We'll go back to that in just a second. The main thing I did end up changing on the story is the showdown at the end is very vague here. It doesn't give a lot of information, and that's fine at this point. Um, but it really was kind of a they fight the pirate captain, a dramatic battle, and then they release the curse, and then it just says they successfully destroy the ship, bring the souls, and then Blackheart's spirit finds closure and expresses gratitude. He's actually thankful, and then the three crew members just, I guess, just go back to their ship and go on with their lives. And it really didn't seem like there was a lot of stakes at the end. So I did end up deciding that one of the crew members will end up sacrificing themselves to save the others, so that there's much higher stakes at the end there. But as you can tell, again, it gave a lot of great information, great new ideas. And back to Pseudo right here, you can see where, like I said, I've sort of um, picked what I like, and then kept these word counts so that I have an idea of how long these sections need to be. Because now we get to the fun part where we're actually going to generate these beats. So when you come over here to your chapters, the first one already has the box up for you. Since we have 5 chapters in our outline, all 5 of them um, show up in this little drop down box, and we'll create those as needed as we go. So yes, you can generate the beats right here, and it will take the information. You can see it's got your chapter information right up here. So again, this is why I keep this word count, so I know how many words I'm going to use. And it will generate these beats. The problem is, of course, how many beats is it going to generate? It's going to generate a lot. It thinks that you need probably 10 to 15 to 20 beats. And since we're working on a short story, we don't want that. The main thing to know is the beat. When the beats generate, you just number them in the box, and for every beat that is in this box here, it's going to generate about 200 words, roughly. So if we're looking for 250 to 500 words, maybe a little bit more, the introduction, always seems to have a little bit more going on. But we're going to probably need oops. See if we can highlight the whole thing here. We're going to probably need at least 4 beats. So that's probably looking at more like 800 words if they're 200 words each. But I still feel like it's better to have more than less. And again, um, since we're looking at the intro, it might end up being a little bit more than 500 words anyway. All right, so at this point, now you could take this paragraph that you've created for your first part of your short story, and you could actually, again, go back to ChatGPT or Bard or whatever AI you're using, and you could put in your summary, and you could ask it to generate however many. You could ask it to break it down into however many beats that you want, and chances are you could get that to do it for you. But I'm just going to kind of come in and do it myself so that I sort of have an idea of how many words I want it to be. Or you know what, we might even just do the 2 beats and let it have enough to work with and see what it comes up with here. So it might generate more like 400 to 500 words, and we may have to beef it out just a little bit more. But yeah, we'll keep all the chapters separate, even though they're smaller areas. Okay, so now you'll get to see exactly how this generates. You've got a good amount of information on each of these beats for it to work with, and that should be quite enough information for it to go on. Now, when you get down to where your prose is going to pop up, there are options here. I would say we will have other projects where we will maybe play around with the best prose a little bit more just to see where it takes your story. But just FYI, the best prose is not going to follow your beats quite as closely as the most accurate will. And because of that, I have found that it makes more sense to use the most accurate. Okay, so now that we are ready to generate prose, we're going to back up a little bit, because what I'm actually going to do at this point is I'm actually going to get rid of some of this information. Now, remember, this was sort of the first generic synopsis that it came up with. It even still has the original names of the characters. We don't need that anymore. I'm just going to get rid of that altogether, because honestly, I want the generator to be looking at the most important information. None of this information is important anymore. The brain dump is not important anymore. What is important is what's right under the brain dump right over here. And we hadn't even gotten to this yet because it didn't matter up to this point, but now it does. And as you can see, I've already dumped in sort of my general all-purpose, what usually goes in my style box. Tweaked a little bit to this particular story. We know we're doing steampunk horror. I might even beef this up a little bit at this point. Um, let's say steampunk fantasy horror. So that way it kind of knows that it's more of a gas lamp. We've already got ghost horror is fantasy in a lot of ways. When you're dealing with the supernatural horror, it's assumed, but I'm just going to add that in. And I do want it to have a psychological, um, thriller vibe, because we want it to be really intense, scary story, hopefully, right? And I have heard some people will really flesh this genre thing out, and this is something that I imagine we will play with more, because I think that you could probably add a little bit more to this, maybe even add tropes up into the genre box, or things like that. I tend to put those in the style box for now. I kind of feel like the style box is the more important box. You do have this option here to match my style. I've actually tried it, and I with big chunks of my own writing, and that was not assisted with AI, and it does give you a really good description of a match of your style. So if you want to try to stick close to what you usually do, that's actually where I got some of what's in my style box now. The dynamic sentences and the high drama were a few of the things that were part of my match style. And then I added psychological horror, ominous atmosphere, right? Again, this is somewhere where I might add tropes. So tropes, we have steampunk and horror. I'm not going to add that horror again because we've already got it in there. But um, pirate curse, is another one. Um, I don't know that it's going to make as much of a difference here, because it's a shorter piece, and it's not as involved. But if it was a romance or a mystery, and you had really specific elements that you're looking to add, this is a really good place for it. So we're going to kind of keep it pretty simple for now. I did put third person deep VOB. I'm using present tense. A lot of people would probably use past tense, but really into present tense right now. So I'm kind of interested to see what a horror story will come out feeling like in this present tense. I'm hoping that it will, sort of up the tension and that kind of thing. So we'll see how that goes. But you can play around with this a lot, and that is a lot of what we'll be doing on this channel, is playing around with these things. Now, another thing that you're going to want to look at is, if you want, you can actually add more to this area of your beats. If you want to give it specific instructions, this is usually where I'm looking to put more information about the voice of the prose, right? So that sort of vibe, the tone, the voice, anything like that that you want the AI to really keep in mind whenever it's doing its thing. And it will refer to, if you put it in these brackets here like we're about to, it will refer to this information every time it starts generating a new piece of information. So you have to be careful what you put in here. There have been certain things where I put something in, I wanted it to sound like she's talking this way, or talking to this audience, and it'll kind of pick up on that and repeat itself sometimes. So you have to be a little cautious. But in this case, we might say something like, we know this is going to be a tense situation, and it's a steampunk, so we want it to have this feeling of you're in this steampunk world. So I might put something along the lines of use interesting steampunk inspired banter uh, between characters, right? So we'll try something like that and see what happens. And then hopefully when it gets to dialogue, it will sort of think about, well, what, what is something that might work for this genre that really makes it feel like this genre. Okay, so, and when we do more contemporary, I do a lot of contemporary paranormal romance, and that's where I use this sort of box a lot to really get the personality of my characters in this kind of short story. It's not a huge focus for the personality of any one character. So we're keeping it simple here, but in future videos, you'll get to see us play around with that a little bit more. Okay, well, I think we're ready, guys. So I've got 2 beats here, and we're going to see how much it generates. I'm hoping, because it is 133 words, they're pretty beefy beats. Hopefully we'll get a good amount of words down here, and let's see what happens. It does take a minute. The most accurate even says that it is going to be a little slower. So this is when you kind of take a break, take a sip of coffee. I am going to take the opportunity to mention that I am going to post a link to my Substack in the video description. I would love for you guys to come on over there. That is where I am planning on posting a lot of this direct prose that we're getting from Sudowrite, so that you guys can actually read through the whole thing exactly as Sudowrite has written it for each of these projects. And we're going to finish out the steampunk short story, and I will have the completed short story there. And I might do one more video to beef out some of these other sections that we've got going on, since we're just getting started on the story, but we'll see. But yeah, definitely check out the Substack and follow along with all of the stories there. I'm really, really excited to share some of these ideas. Okay, so it's done. We've ended up with 444 words. So that's really not too bad. Again, this section, we're hoping for 250 to 500 words. So this should be something we could beef up a little bit. And as you can tell, it is so a dense fog swirled. Okay, you can already see that it's in past tense. It did not pick up on the present tense request. So in that sense, maybe it is something that needs to be mentioned up here at the top. And I only say that because the present tense does not seem to be the most common. It sort of defaults, and you'll find this on the right page too. It defaults to past tense quite a bit. So it did give me past tense here. So that's fine. We will just continue the rest of it in past tense. So yeah, dense fog swirled and whispered around the Spectre salvage airship, its enormous brass and iron hull groaning softly in protest as it navigated through the murky night sky. Sadie McAllister, her green eyes focused and determined, gripped the wheel firmly as she peered through the haze. Her short brown hair fluttered against her cheeks and strands dancing in the rhythm of the wind. It's a little fluffy here. Honestly, one thing that I will sometimes do is just not mention the physical descriptions of the characters, and this is kind of why, because if you do mention it, it will mention it, and some people like that, some people don't. It really depends. Okay, so anything on these pneuma compass yet? She called out to Elijah Turner, who stood by a complicated array of gauges, levers, and copper piping that served as their paranormal detection system. Steam-powered device hummed with energy, emitting soft puffs of vapor as it worked. I mean, not bad, right? And see, you go back to the beats. I asked it to describe the steampunk tech a little bit, and the giving it a name might come from that. Give it interesting steampunk inspired banter. Strange readings are getting stronger, Captain, replied Elijah, his mechanical limbs whirring with each precise movement. Clockwork Cyborg's calm demeanor betrayed no hint of fear or concern, but his intuition told him that something was amiss. Look alive, Grace, Sadie shouted toward the crow's nest where the fiery-haired Grace Simmons balanced with ease, her freckles barely visible through the fog, were closing in. See, it's not bad. Okay. Now, what's funny is it did go all the way to where, yeah, where they find the ship, and it's not a bad start. It's not a bad start, and this is how you get it to uh, put in those little details. And I like that there is a good amount of dialogue here. This is why I made sure that, you know, dynamic sentences and clever dialogue is usually part of my style box. Okay. Well, I think that this has been a pretty successful first chapter. And now all I have to do to complete the story is to come back and do the same thing with each one. So I'm going to create chapter 2 and go all the way down through chapter 5. And again, the next one also 250 to 500 words. So that would probably be another 2 beat. And then when we get down to chapter 3, this is where it gets a little bit longer. So this one I would likely do 6 beats. Because again, it goes in sets of 2, so it has to be an even number. You can't do 5. If I'm going for 1,000, maybe I'd do 5 beats, but you can't. You have to do 2, 4, 6. So I'd probably do 6 to 8 beats on this one, and it probably needs to be fleshed out a little bit. I've got a lot more information down here on chapter 4. So yeah, I'm going to continue with the project, and that will either be, well, I'm going to post the entire story on, oops, let's go back down here. I'm going to post the entire story on Substack so you can read it there. And again, I will make videos to at least show you how I break down these beats a little bit more, but we'll see it in a lot of other projects as well. So I hope this has been fun for you guys. Drop me a comment if you want to see any particular types of stories or genres covered in the series. We are going to work on a lot of different projects. And again, don't forget to go down and subscribe to the Substack so you can read these stories in full and check out exactly what Sudowrite can actually do. So we'll catch you guys at the next video and see you later. Happy writing, y'all.